Oh, hi. Welcome back to another episode of Blackdot Miniatures and Paints. Kevin coming back to you this week with a Dark Angels Intercessor. Like I said, we're doing a showcase of all the different Space Marine factions. We're coming through checking out Ultramarines last week, Dark Angels this week. I know we got some Blood Angels on deck and we got some Imperial Fists on deck. Hadn't decided what we're going to do next week, but this week we're doing the Dark Angels. I started painting Dark Angels whenever I first got into the hobby, and this guy is just the best I've ever done. Let's check him out together. So first I come through with a Minitaire Dark Green. This is almost a mirror copy of Caliban Green, so you can definitely use that. Mine's just already in a paint pot, ready to go, squeezed in the airbrush, and we're freaking painting. So we're doing a top down for the most part. We're trying to leave some of the black behind, but we don't want it to be a solid black. So just take your time on that. Then we come through with a FW yellow ink. We're just, again, top down, zenithal highlight, trying to sit here and take the green to a little bit brighter hue. Be a little bit careful with this. If you go a little bit too hard on it, it starts to look just like a salamander, just bright green. So be careful here. If you need to thin it down, go ahead and thin it down. So with any Space Marine, once you lay down your base color, once you lay down your highlight, really the next step for you to go through and take on is edge highlighting. It sucks. We know it sucks. If you watch any of my videos, every time I talk about edge highlighting, it sucks. Here we're working in a just kind of golden zone. I dipped into a little bit of flow improver, watered it down a little bit so I can get a good flowing consistency. And all we're doing is just going through and panel lining the heck out of this guy. We're hitting every little hard edge that I could find to come up with just to sit here and pop it. Because whenever you've got this dark color going to the green, going to this bright edge highlight, it really brings it to where it needs to be. It really takes it from that 9 to a 10. It's just it's a mandatory step, I'm sorry. So while I've got you here watching me do these edge highlights, guys, if you can, please hit that subscribe button. We're sitting at about an 82% viewership of unsubscribed folks. All I'm trying to do is get this thing to where I have people who are checking it out. If we end up somehow, by the grace of God, getting monetized, that'd be great. All it's going to do is turn this back around so I can further my own hobby abilities and bring you more content, bring you more models, bring you different kinds of stuff that we can look at together. So with that shameless plug over, let's get back to watching the edge highlighting. This is the worst part of the video, and then after that, it just goes up, gets better. Alright, so the power of movie magic is amazing. That took me forever to go through and edge highlight the crap out of this guy. Turned out great. I'm really happy with just this to begin with. The next step is just to start laying down more colors. Like Kenny Boucher says, we're painting by numbers here. All we're doing is taking Abbadon Black, we're filling in all the soft joints in his power armor, and then we're also doing the base coat for anything that's going to be silver later on. So all of his power pack parts, all of his gun parts, the magazine, the barrel, the gas tube, all of that. So just go through, take your time, and pick out the different parts around this model. Alright, so now we're moving on to XV88. We're picking out his pistol holster, we're picking out his pouches, his little tactical sandwich holder, whatever he's got going on in those pouches. Just go through and lay a nice layer down on here. Again, with all my paints, we're working thin. We're working off of a wet palette, so it is thin. It sometimes requires 2 coats. XV88 does have really good coverage, but if you need to hit it twice, no big deal. So originally I did Gunmetal Gray from Vallejo Metal Color. It was a little bit too dark. I keep going back to that color thinking it's not going to be as dark as it is. It always disappoints me. We moved to Vallejo Metal Color Silver. All we're doing is laying over the blacks that we put down earlier, getting all those metals looking nice and shiny. We'll come through later and do a wash on them that'll take them down and, you know, shade all the recesses. But this Vallejo Metal Color Silver is a good starting point. Alright, and for the casing for his bolter, we're just doing Khorne Red. I didn't get it on film, but we went through later and did a edge highlight with Mephiston Red on him. It turned out really, really well. I really liked it. I got into the painting. I got into sitting there doing it, and sometimes it's easy to forget to hit that record button. I'm not gonna lie to you. So all we're doing is laying that down. This one will require 2 coats, especially if you're working thin. Khorne Red just doesn't stick well. So next we're coming through with Zandri Dust. We're going to do the Aquila on his chest, which you see I've already got it started there. And then we're also going to do his knee pad. For his knee pad, I've seen it to where it has just an opposing checkered quadrant kind of deal going on. Looks really cool. I wanted to give it a rip because I've never tried it. All we did was do an X. And then from there we filled in with paint the left quadrant, top left, and the bottom right quadrant. So just go through, be really careful, don't mess up our edge highlighting that we sat there and worked so damn hard on, but this really helped the model stand out and look different. Alright, so now we're on to Screaming Skull. All we're doing here is hitting this knee pad, trying to focus the brightest part of it in the center of it, and then work outward about 70% of what we covered with Zandri Dust previously. We are working thin here with some flow aid, so it's going to flow, it's going to look just stark and bright, but whenever you actually get it to dry out and start looking at it after it's done, looks just fine. No big deal here. We're also hitting the raised edges of all the feathers on his Aquila. We're going to go through and shade this here in a bit, but at the same time, it's okay. We can put a filter over it with the sepia later, and it's going to look just fine. Be real careful here. If you mess up though, no big deal. Go back to your Zandri Dust, fix it. Shit, if you really mess it up, just redo it. Start over with Zandri Dust and go from there. And this isn't part of my normal workup. I just kind of had the paint handy. Went ahead and used the Screaming Skull mix to go ahead and edge highlight all of the pouches around him. It turned out great. I loved it. Normally I would go to something a little less bright, but it worked out like a champ. Alright, so now we're coming through with Sepia Wash. We're just hitting the previous leather parts that we did. This is just going to filter down that bright color, make it look its best without having to go through and change any colors, change anything else. Then we move on to a Screaming Skull and Ceremite white mix. We're focusing on about 30% of the knee pad that we did previously, and we're also laying down an edge highlight around the perimeter of those quadrants. We come through later with an Abbadon Black and that sells the effect, but this is definitely a mandatory step. Finally, we move on to the Aquila on his chest. We're just focusing on the very tips of all of the feathers on his chest. We're focusing on trying to pop the edges, pop it just to that nth degree, makes it look its very best. So now we're coming through with Retributer Armour. We're just hitting the skull on his shoulder pad there, no big deal there. And then we're also hitting the skull and the wing on his bolter casing. Just be careful, work with a small brush. Whenever you're working on the inside of that bolter like that, just be very careful not to jack up your green. It was pretty simple. It's easy to get to on this model. So I might actually start becoming a believer in what you guys have been talking about with the using a dark color to start with. I'm still not sold on Bugman's Glow, scratch that noise. But we went to a Cadian Fleshtone and a XV88 mix 1:1 thin down, and we're just working towards the highlights. That's all we're doing here, is trying to highlight up, leave the darker stuff in the recesses, and then progressively work up. This is probably the best face I have ever done. I was so impressed with this guy, so try it out. Then we move on to Cadian Fleshtone by itself. We're just working in a smaller highlight area than what we did previously with the XV88. It's not a big deal either. Try and hit his eyebrows, the top of his cheeks, and then I like to run a line down the side of his head where the light is naturally falling, just to make that stand out and pop a little bit more. Finally, we moved on to Kislev Flesh. which I was a little concerned whenever I moved to this color. I figured it was going to be way too bright, it was going to pop too much, it was just going to take this nice face that I had going here and just really ruin it. I did work super thin here, and that is what I think saved it, because I was actually able to go through later, pop in some more Kislev Flesh. Again, working thin is your best friend whenever you're trying to create smooth, solid transitions. Alright, so finally, the last thing that was left unpainted, he looked really weird with the green mohawk. We came through with Abbadon Black, just went ahead and filled that in with his hair, and then we also put the X on his knee pad. Then we moved on to a normal. Honestly, I was looking at him saying, shit, he is just so green. He is on the verge of being a salamander. I would like him a little bit darker. So we went through, no big deal, straight out of the pot. The only thing that we really monitored with this was to make sure that it wasn't pulling on the nice flat surfaces where our inks just popped it up. So go through, hit it with this normal. Honestly, if you like it that brighter green, don't do it. Not a big deal. But I definitely wanted to make him a little bit darker, look a little bit more Dark Angel-y, and I think it did just sell what I was going for. So the final color we used on this paint job was Dawnstone. We just went around the perimeter of his hair, we did an edge highlight, then after we were pretty satisfied with that, we wiped off most of the paint on our brush, kind of went to a dry brush mentality, and started streaking that across the top of his head. Just be very careful here, don't mess up what we've previously laid down on the face. Like I said, best face I've ever done. So without a doubt, this is the absolute best Dark Angel I've ever painted. I'm glad I was able to bring this to you guys. If you liked anything in this video, please hit that subscribe button. We are sitting at about an 82% viewership that is not subscribed whatsoever. All it's going to do is help the channel grow. That way I can bring you more content. GW is proud of their stuff. We all know that. So if you can, please hit that subscribe button. It's free. It'll help me out. It'll mean a lot to me, and I'd appreciate the heck out of it. Again, this has been Kevin with Blackdot Miniatures Paints. Super happy y'all could come and check me out. We'll see y'all in next week's video. We'll see what we're painting then. I don't know yet. Hadn't decided. But we'll check you then. Bye for now.